Rip.
Let her rip, Tater Chip.
Hello, all.
Hi, Rusty with Springfield Leather, Kevin with Springfield Leather.
We have had myriads of questions about sewing machines ever since we have started selling sewing machines. And we've had a tremendous amount of people call us and tell us how much they appreciated our videos, our sewing machines for dummies, and all of Rusty's expertise concerning sewing machines. And so we thought we'd put a few things together here to kind of put them all in one small package so you can go right to the things you need. Some of the things we're going to talk about today are a progression of sewing machines. If you're a beginner, what machine do you start with? Where do you go from there? We're going to talk about stitching patterns, machine stitching pattern versus hand stitching patterns, oiling and maintenance. And this is probably going to be a big one. We're going to talk about appropriate thread tension and how to think regarding thread tension. How hard is it to change motors? We're going to let you know. We're going to talk about thread weights on the top and on the bottom, what you can and what you can't do, what's smart, what's not smart. We're going to talk about how heavy of leather you can sew and how thin of leather you can sew on the various machines. Somebody wants to know about binding attachments for a class 4, so we're going to talk about all of those things.
So we want to say thank you first to all the people whose names are associated with these questions.
Yes.
The ability to come up with questions on your own for us, so yes, we can say, okay, well, this is a question I get a lot, this is a question I get a lot. But what's really nice is when you have some input. And so if you have a question as we go through this, there are people ready to answer those, or to give us those questions so we can answer them. So again, we appreciate everybody's questions and input. So
for what it's worth, the machines we have here in back of us, and we'll show you pictures a little more clearly here as we go along. But for now, we've got a class 3. Behind it, we have a class 4, and we have a class 26. We have a behemoth of a class 7, and we have a class 20. These are all Cobra machines. Rusty and I have decided over the years that Cobra machines are the ones we want to stick with. And as we have told you in other videos, it's not so much the machine that you buy as it is the people that you buy it from. The reason for that is you are going to need them.
that's a fact.
It just is a fact. And if you haven't discovered that yet, you will sooner or later. So differences in machines. First of all, class 3 and class 4 are essentially the same machine. One's just got a longer throat. They will both sew the identical amount of thickness. The thread use is the same, everything.
The parts interchange.
It's pretty much the same.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Did we mention that it's the same?
It's pretty close. Yeah, I think so.
You get a really nice package right now with either of these machines if you want, and that's happy. The machine in the center of us here, the class 26. Now, I want to talk just a minute about that because many of the phone calls that I get, and I'm sure Rusty does too, are, I want to buy a machine. This is the first one. I'm tired of hand stitching. I sew this, that, and the other thing. I'd like one machine that'll really do about everything. Would you please enlighten me on that? Here's the deal. There is no machine that will do it all. It doesn't exist, because if it did, we would not have these other machines. The class 26 is probably, did I say probably?
Depends on what comes after, probably.
It's probably the closest thing you'll get to that, but it is not that.
Because that doesn't exist.
That's right. It's close. Moving on, the class 7 is made to sew trucks together. Just that thing is heavy duty. It'll sew like,
an inch and an eighth, I think.
It is a dinosaur. And if you need it, you'll know that you need it. Or you can ask us, we'll tell you if you need it. Then we have a class 20, which is a flatbed machine. It's a good all-around sewing machine, and it's happy. So first question. This gentleman asked he would love to hear the progression for a hobbyist for a starter leather sewing machine, and then going up from there.
You know, the best starter sewing machine is the one you need. Yeah, Lefty's back here. He's like, these right here.
Now, that sounds funny, but it's really true because it hinges on what you do the most of.
Right. So if you make wallets and you make small little handbags, or maybe you make even some purses and some clutches, and let's say you even make some dress belts, right?
I tell you what, in your answer, let's do a little promotion of the 26.
Well, that's not the one I was going to offer.
All right, go ahead.
That's not true. my thing is okay, but what I've given you right there.
How about if I give you the question?
The Class 20 and the Class 26 will do both, though.
That's true. So I'll give you the question. This comes to me on the phone. You know, what I'm really going to do, I'm going to sew wallets and belts and holsters and sheaths.
Great. I'll send both machines.
Thank you. That's the problem. For a person that is really going to do serious leather work, what was the deal breaker there, Rusty? What project was the deal maker?
Holster and sheaths.
Yeah. Yep. That's it. As soon as somebody says holsters and sheaths, you know what that says? It says Class 3 and Class 4. So we proceed on. Well, I'm not going to sew those great big heavy holsters. I'm just going to sew, you know, maybe 2 layers of 8 to 9. That's about it.
Well,
yeah,
you can. The challenge comes with, if you're sewing 2 layers of 8 to 9, are they flat? Are they folded over? Is it a revolver holster? Is it a pancake holster? The other thing is you're only going to have so much thread capacity. The thread weight that you're going to run through a 2 or a 26 or a 20 is going to be a 207. So is that 207 going to satisfy you in the look that you want? Is it going to have that heavy, girthy thread look that says strength that you want?
So these are questions that we're going to ask our customers. And we already know the answers to some of them, because I can tell you, everybody wants to sew something heavier than their sewing machine will sew at some point.
So the answer to the question is what's the best beginner machine? The best beginner machine is the machine that will accomplish the majority of what you make.
And do it well.
Correct. So in our scenario, we have handbags and some lightweight wallets and some lighter belts and these and this and this and some holsters and some sheaths. Okay, I'm going to recommend the 26 because of the versatility of the cylinder arm when you're sewing bags.
I would as well.
If you want a flatbed, it has a work platform that comes with it. You can put it on there. It's got a flatbed.
You're good to go.
But you're likely still going to have to hand sew your holsters and your sheaths.
Possibly, especially when they get heavy. Because if you end up having to do more knife sheaths and holsters than anything else, well then the Class 26 is just not going to be the one. If you only do lightweight holsters and sheaths now and then, okay.
So hopefully that gets us into why we would suggest one over the other. Now, if you sew handbags and you sew maybe duffel bags and things like that, you can sew those sort of things on a Class 20.
Yeah, but
the problem that you run into is that if you cannot make the material lay flat, that means that you are stitching through at an angle. So you may have a good thread or a good stitch clearance on the top piece of leather, but you likely will not on the bottom or vice versa.
Yeah, that's a bad thing.
Which is where the versatility of a cylinder arm comes in.
Yes, and having said that and listened to that, the Class 20 is a machine that we use in our shop where we sew lots of flat goods. If you're sewing wallet interiors and wallets and belts, man, that thing is just hard to beat.
And literally, we have 5 of these running full time, sewing nothing but wallet interiors.
And you can sit down. That's happy.
You sit down, the little stone pouches that we make for Dan's whetstone.
Yeah.
So basically, they're just 2 flat pieces of 3-ounce leather stitched in a U. It's done. They just run them off in a chain.
So a lining to a belt, zoom, you're good to go. And again, you can see this is when we run into an item like a holster or a sheath, we go to a different machine. That's why we're talking about 2 machines. So I think we've covered that fairly well.
Pretty well. Here's
the next question. Do you lose stitch pattern with a machine versus hand saddle stitch?
So something that's interesting is that they make multiple style cutting points on needles. And so you can get a spear point, you can get a diamond point, you can get an altered spear point.
You can get a round one.
And so the stitch pattern can be altered and changed by which needle you use. And that's not using a round one necessarily on leather. That's using your different cutting points. A lot of them we don't carry because it's a lot of technical. Most of the time, a person doesn't really want a whole lot of alteration. You can normally tell that it's been machine stitched rather than hand sewn, though, because it is very consistent.
You know, and take this into consideration. Me, I don't care. I don't care if a leather product that I would buy, a fine handcrafted leather product that I would buy, I don't care if it's hand stitched or machine stitched. It just doesn't mean that much to me. It may mean that much to Rusty or someone else or to you. That's fine. It just doesn't to me. So
yeah, really, you know, the difference that you get between hand stitching and a sewing machine, if you're saddle stitching, you've got 2 pieces of thread passing each other and coming out the opposite side and switching sides. In a sewing machine, you have a lock stitch. The thread goes down, gets looped around the next piece of thread, and comes back out. Same piece of thread on the same side all the time. So, you know, if you had something that you were going to, there's a specific spot on this pair of chaps, or this for instance, maybe like a shoeing shap or something, or on a saddle, and that's going to get rubbed all the time. Well, maybe your best bet would be to hand sew. Maybe your best bet would just be to stitching groove so that the thread lays below the surface of the leather. All of those things are things that you have to figure out and are not really going to be the make or break deal usually on whether you're going to buy a sewing machine.
Right. There's no end of decision making there on your part. How about this question? Proper oiling and maintenance, please.
Please. I like that. You can get a long ways with please.
Now, let me go first, Rusty, if you don't mind. Oil anything that moves.
That one. A lot of sewing machine companies, especially Cobra, have been kind enough to put red dots in specific spots that need to be oiled. Now,
they don't need lots of oil.
They don't. And there's some spots that have a little hole that don't have a red dot. If it moves, oil it.
If in doubt,
oil it. Okay, now, with that being said, suggestion. Oil after use.
And use sewing machine oil, stainless sewing machine oil.
So it won't stain the leather, but if you let's say you shut down for the night, you're getting ready to go to dinner or to bed or whatever it is, put a drop of oil in those spots if you've really worked the machine that day. You know, if you find that you're getting oil coming down the foot or the presser or down in the needle, put a little piece of leather under there, and then just put the foot down. That oil will come through the machine, do its job, and then be absorbed into that little scrap piece of leather, and all is well. Here's the thing. You will over-oil it. Will it hurt the machine? No. Will it be frustrating because you got oil all over yourself? Yes. My biggest thing is and I used to have a garage that I had my machine set up in. If you do, or if you have your sewing machine set up in a workshop that is not temperature controlled, you need to watch for moisture, because it will draw moisture, and you usually can see it in places that have a bare metal spot.
Especially if it sits for a while.
Exactly. If you notice that, that does need to be addressed. And if you're not using the machine a lot, and that's the situation, I would still suggest that you oil it, run the machine just a little bit, or at least turn it so that you prevent any kind of...
Under normal circumstances, oiling once a week is plenty.
Yeah.
Once a month is probably fine.
For the normal use in the situation that we find. The shop, they oil maybe once a week, maybe twice a week.
And they run them, like he said, all the time.
They run 8 hours a day, 6 days a week a lot of times. And so that's a little bit different. If you're finding yourself running that machine that much,
happy days for you.
Yeah, good job.
Okay, let's move on to this one.
Courtney,
I had a brilliant idea for this. Would you mind? This is...
Oh, no, I love watching your brilliant ideas.
This one, what's the question again?
I don't know.
Courtney Martin.
Which one is it?
Right there. Would be interested in covering appropriate...
Okay, so yes. Would be interested...
This is probably the most frequently raised problem that we face, is it not, or close to it?
I don't know. I rarely have people ask me about 1x2s and 2x2s and...
Come on, give me a break. The question comes in, man, my machine was sewing fine, and now it's loose on the bottom, or it's too tight on the bottom. Okay, we're going to ask you a myriad of questions. What it comes down to is that you need to understand the tension function of the machine in relationship to the thickness of the leather that you sew. Now, take, for example, this heavy-duty class 3 or 4, but the same thing applies to all the rest of the machines. You have a tension arrangement on the top side of the machine. You have one on the front end of the machine. When that machine leaves here, it will have sewn through, 3/4 of an inch of leather?
Give or take.
All right, so bear with me. Here's a couple of happy little boards. Now, we're gonna pretend this is a 12-ounce piece of skirting, and this is another 12-ounce piece of skirting. We got some pretty heavy leather here, and we're gonna sew through it. So we do. The class 3 and the class 4, they sew through the leather this with ease. The question is, where is the knot? Well, it's supposed to be between them, but you can't see exactly where that knot is. That knot could be, can you see that spot there? I'll try and make it bigger. That knot could be right there, and the stitch would look just fine. That knot could be up here, and the stitch would be just fine. Hopefully, it's somewhere around here. We try to get it there for you. Okay, you bought the machine. The machine goes out, or it's come to you, and now you're sewing 2 belts together, and the machine is just fine. But all of a sudden, you're sewing a different project, and it's not fine. And you call Kevin or Rusty at Springfield Leather and say, hey, this machine was sewing great, and all of a sudden that thread's loose on the top, on the bottom.
Okay, give me this. All of a sudden.
Yeah, thank you.
So all of a sudden, something changed. And so that's really where the next question is going to be. Well, okay, when you say all of a sudden, like you were sewing the 2 pieces of leather and it changed from this stitch to the next stitch, what does all of a sudden mean?
Yeah.
All of a sudden means something changed.
Yeah.
Did you change something, or did the machine change?
Exactly. So we're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. What are you sewing? We're going to ask you about the size of needle that you're using. We're going to ask you about the size of thread that you're using.
I'm going to ask if you changed the thread.
We're going to ask that. Did you break a needle? If so, did you have to rethread the machine? There's a number of questions. One question that I and Rusty will ask you is, did you change the projects that you're working on? Are you sewing with different leather now, or did it just all of a sudden start happening on the same project? Most of the time we find out that people have changed their sewing project. So here you have this 15-ounce piece of skirting or whatever it is, and now you're going to sew it to a piece. You're going to sew a 2-ounce piece of lining leather to it. Okay. So if that machine, if that knot was down here on the thick piece, you wouldn't have seen it. But if that knot is down here on this piece, there's a difference. The bottom thread might look either too tight or too loose. So you have to think about it this way. Rarely, if ever, will you need to change the bottom tension. Am I right?
Preferably you don't.
Preferably you never have to change the bottom tension. Let me emphasize that. You should almost never have to change that bottom tension. If you do, more than likely you're going to get grief. So that means the top tension is the issue. So let's say your top tension is too tight. That means that the bottom thread cannot pull that top thread down. Please understand that. If the top tension is too loose, please understand that the bottom thread will pull that top tension down as far as it possibly can do. And that's what causes your thread to look bad on the bottom. So in that instance, when the thread looks bad on the bottom, what do? You increase the tension on the top to prevent the bottom thread from pulling it down. So instead of the knot being down here, the top thread will only allow itself to be pulled down to here, and you're good to go. If you think that you're gonna, now the class 3 or 4 will all sew a piece of 4 to 5 ounce leather. They'll sew it. But if you think you're gonna hide your knot in the middle of a piece of 4 ounce leather, it's not gonna happen.
Not on the size of thread that you're going to be running through that.
Just not gonna happen. You might hide it with some 69 thread, but not with 277 or 346. It'll be hard even with 207. You put 2 layers of 4 to 5 together, you can probably hide it. It's all in that top tension. You either have to allow the bottom thread to pull it down or not allow it to pull it down.
So in your scenario,
Yep.
you didn't have to change thread. You only changed projects.
That's correct.
Okay. So in my scenario,
Which is different. Yeah.
I'm going to change projects and I'm going to change colors of thread. Not size, just color. Now, all of a sudden, wouldn't you know it, I have absolutely no bobbin tension. I'm going to have to tighten that bobbin.
I'd rather you didn't.
I would rather you didn't either. I would rather that you took the bobbin back out and checked to make sure that you had the thread under the tension plate correctly.
Yes.
Because you changed something.
Something had to happen.
If you didn't change needles and you didn't change size of threads, but you changed colors, you've missed something somewhere. Now, all of a sudden, I've got a beautiful stitch on top and the knot's in the bottom.
And what happened, Rusty, if you changed the color of the top thread?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I changed all the thread to white, and now I've got what looks like a beautiful stitch on the top, but I've got entirely too much bobbin tension.
What if all of a sudden your top thread is just laying on there.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. If you didn't hit everything correct on the top when you rethreaded the machine, you're not creating enough top tension, so it appears that the bobbin tension is now too tight. The one thing that I know for fact that I have annoyed more of you with is, are you sure you threaded it correctly? Well, yes, I did. Would you do me a favor? Would you rethread it and call me back? Well, it isn't going to do any good. I get it. About 10 minutes later, I get a phone call. Well, son of a gun, I don't know.
That ain't what he said.
No, that's not. But if you've simply gone from one project to another without changing threads, without breaking a needle, then the project has changed and it has altered the way that your machine is sewing because the project is different.
Yeah.
If something catastrophic has happened, if you have broken a needle, if you have bent a needle,
and not noticed,
whatever the case may be, you change the needle because you went to a different size of thread, right? Did you get that needle in just right? Because the tops of them are round. They have no guide.
If it's turned a little bit.
It may be turned. It's creating the hoop.
You might skip a stitch every 4 inches.
Right? It's just turned away to where it's not catching the hook.
As you might imagine, the tension issue is probably one of the most frustrating things for you as a sewing machine owner, and for us as a seller of sewing machines.
And the real reason is because it's probably being overthought.
Yeah. So just learn to understand the basics of thread tension. Understand that top and that bottom, and always remember, you should almost never have to change that bobbin tension.
Well, it's like this, Kevin. My car just isn't running all that good. So I'm going to go change the air filter, the spark plugs, the plug wires, the rotor, the cap, the points, the oil. I'm going to air up the tires. I'm going to clean out. I'm going to vacuum the car, and I'm going to put gas in it. Now it runs much better. What was the problem? I don't know. Obviously, it needed a tune-up.
It needed some attention.
But there was one thing that was causing the problem. If you want to know what that one thing is, then ultimately you only turn one knob at a time. And that allows you to mentally picture how we're talking about with a sewing machine. If you're going to go in and change the tension at 3 different points, you have no idea what you've done. And you don't know what the response from point A is going to be to point B to point C. So you got a lot of variables that you didn't need. So I think that's enough about tension.
I do too. Let's go to a fun
We got a couple live.
Let's have some live ones.
So one here from Instagram. What if you're sewing on a thin leather that will not feed? The presser foot is not touching it.
So you have an issue with the machine isn't dialed in to where the presser foot is coming down as far as it should. That is depending on the machine, that is a back here issue that is not something that I could explain on the spot without knowing the machine and which one we've got. But ultimately, there is adjustment on the back side of most any machine that controls how the setting of the presser foot is.
That could also be linked to the linkage.
Or you've got your presser foot, the knee lift, or on these machines, the chain is out of adjustment. If you can undo that and it drops down, easy fix. So always start with the easy fix.
Okay, Cobra 26.
Cobra 26. Check the chain linkage first, because likely that's the problem. Yeah. So in other words, take the chain linkage off of the foot and let it go and make sure that it comes down all the way, and likely that'll be the issue. Well, here's the thing. On the 26, this one, I don't have a chain on it. That's why I was...
Yeah, I was trying to get...
You want to get out of your way?
I can get to the 3 and the 4.
Well, this chain and this presser foot are what I'm talking about. Undo that and undo it all the way through to where you've got the chain loose, and that'll drop that foot down. That really is likely the issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You got another live one?
And the 26 one, the chain for the top side of it, you actually fold the machine back over, right? When it comes back up?
I don't think so.
What do you mean fold the machine over?
No, there's a hole drilled for the chain.
The chain comes up through it?
Yeah, chain comes up through the table. Am I right?
It's just like the Class 3. Chain comes up through the table.
The front side of the machine.
What
Where
are
that
you
wing
talking
nut at? That wing nut right there on the front?
Right.
What's underneath that?
Not what you think. Nothing.
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 It's a storage place for Reese's peanut butter cups.
Hey.
Underneath here is the hoop where the chain attaches. Okay, so you've got the hoop underneath of there where the chain attaches for your. So there's a hole in the table. Chain drops down, puts it on here. All right, to be real honest with you, this is a Class 3 table because the Class 26 table got damaged in shipping, and so we set it up for
I
a
was
mock.
just trying to say the chain was underneath there.
For
so.
a mock. Anyway, so when you fold that back, that's where your chain attachment is. That one, but ultimately the thing is, it doesn't really. You might have to check in there, but I would just undo off the presser foot.
Yeah, because
Let it drop.
the feet will go down. You just have to find out what's preventing it from
Yeah.
doing that.
Liz from San Antonio, she's starting out on a budget and she found a Rex machine on eBay for leather and sails. She
Okay,
was wanting to know if it was okay. I don't know anything about a Rex.
I do. Do you?
Good.
Well, a Rex machine is a fine machine. More than likely, I don't know this, but more than likely it's a flatbed since they're recommending it for sales. Probably it does not have a servo motor and a speed reducer. If it has a servo motor only, you're not going to be happy. If it has a servo motor and a speed reducer, then the Rex is going to sew lightweight leather just fine. It's not going to sew heavy leather. If it does not have that speed reducer, though, it's not going to be a happy thing for you.
We brought out a servo motor.
Kevin and I have had this conversation several times. The challenge with a servo motor without a speed reducer is it still operates a lot like a clutch motor. It has to operate off of momentum, and so you likely will have to roll it by hand because the machine is not going to have the torque to start.
Yeah, and there's no power there.
That's what I'm saying. There's no torque. There's no power to it. So speed reducer goes on under the machine like that. Okay, so your motor will attach on one set of these pulleys, and then the other will go up to the machine, to the upper side of the machine. And I'm sure that they can show you. Your motor is going to go to the larger, and the reason is because you want to turn that large wheel so that it creates torque onto the smaller one. So I don't know if we can get one here or not, but at any rate,
we'll move some machines out of the way and we'll show some of the parts on them here.
So there's a question.
This way, when you're sewing with leather, nobody wants to sew fast unless you're in a production atmosphere or a factory. But if you want to sew slowly, then you want your needle to go down and through your two pieces of lightweight leather. And with the servo motor, it will more than likely just go down slowly, but then it'll stop. Because like Rusty said, there's no power. It needs momentum. So you keep increasing the pressure on your feed, and then this is what happens. You go, brrr.
Which is much the same as you would on a clutch. There's a question on here about changing out a motor.
Why don't you do that?
What was it?
Right here. How hard is it to change motors?
Okay, so
It's a pain in the
it's
butt.
really not all that difficult.
It's a pain.
So I don't know if you can if they can flip to this camera. So here you have the mounts.
He probably hates it.
I don't enjoy it, but it's not terribly difficult, and I say that because the mount holes, even from a 1950s machine, are very similar to these holes. The challenge that you will run into is the length of the motor in comparison to where this mount sets. This distance is different.
You're probably going to have to drill a couple holes.
Probably are going to have to drill a couple holes. Ultimately, as long as this is directly below whatever other pulley you're going to attach to. So in other words, if we were putting this on a machine and we were going to set it up, we're going to line these two pulleys up, but this pulley has to be lined up coming through the table going to the hand wheel on the sewing machine.
Right, and keep in mind
A framing square goes a long ways in putting one of these together.
if you do have to drill holes, then there's a good chance you might have to adjust that slot in the bed of the table. That is a pain. I mean, you can do it.
Anything's accomplishable. It's a matter of whether it's worth it or not. Now, if you've got a good sewing machine and you want to slow it down and give it some torque and be able to use it, you're looking at about a $350 upgrade.
Worth the money.
Totally. It is. And like I said, if that's what you've got and that's what you want to work with, all you're talking about is drilling holes for the speed reducer, drilling holes for the base, and mounting the switch, plugging it in. Go to O'Reilly's or AutoZone and get belts for an automotive, and that's it.
Yep. So it's not too hard. You just got to want to do it. Next one. Let's see. You know, I think we'll skip this one and come back to it after this. It says, is there a way you can sew thinner than 6 ounce with a class 3?
Mark, is it Mark?
Mark Wadsworth.
Mark, my friend, yes. Mark, my friend, why? Okay, so here's the challenge is all the parts and pieces on this machine are larger than they are on this machine, okay? So it's harder to create the right amount of tension on a class 3 or class 4 to sew a lighter weight thread. And that's ultimately the challenge that you've got is a 6 ounce leather. You're going to have to go to a lighter weight thread in order to hide the knot.
Well, and if I could, maybe we could simplify the answer a little bit. Rusty said, yes, you can do it. There's just a few things you have to do. First of all, you'd want to go down to about the smallest needle that you can on that, which is what, a 21?
And actually, most places have disced the 21. Right at the moment, I think we're the only ones selling a 21 needle for these machines.
Well, a 21 needle and probably 138 thread. I mean, you could use 69, but
that's the thing is if you go down to a 21 needle and you use a 138 thread, it's going to look fine. If you go to a 21 needle and a 69 weight thread, you could take a 55-gallon drum and throw a rope over the edge of it, and that's pretty much what your hole and your stitch are going to look like.
Yeah. So if you go to a size 21 needle, use 138 thread, you can sew probably 4 ounce leather, 3 ounce leather, as long as your top presser foot is adjusted correctly. It has to have the right amount of pressure so that leather doesn't flag up as that needle comes up and down.
You're going to have to very carefully watch where your knot's at too.
Yes. Yeah, your knot could quite possibly appear to be just flat out on the bottom of the leather or flat out on the top. It's a little bit of a pain, but you can do it. Now 2 layers? Happy days.
2 layers, no problem. The challenge that you've got is you're going to have to loosen so much that you're not going to just rethread the machine with a heavier weight thread and go to sewing. And that's why I really try to steer people away from it, because unless you're going to set that machine up to sew that way all the time, I don't know if it's worth it.
Well, it goes back to that first comment that we made. Is there one machine that'll do it all?
No.
So here's another one. And this is a good question from Tom Kilcullen. If you use 277 on top, can you use 207 in the bobbin?
Yes.
Okay, that's just a flat out.
I always tell people you can go down 1 size. Now, why would you go down 1 size? Because you can get more thread on the bobbin and not have to change it as often.
Yeah, maybe think of it this way: it's friendlier all the way around. It's just friendlier. What needle? He said, I've got the class 4. I've been using 346 on top and 277 in the bottom, but wants to try some smaller projects. So he's using heavy thread on the top, pretty heavy thread in the bobbin, but still he's on the right track.
Sure.
That's a good scenario, but wants to try some smaller projects.
All right, so write this down, okay? This is a recommendation. This is not a requirement. If the hole in the needle where the thread passes through is too large, it will affect the way that the hoop is created and could cause issue with stitching.
I ain't gonna write that down.
If the hole in the needle is too small, it
That's
will
bad.
cause drag on the thread and could fray the thread over time or even cut the thread. Here's some recommendations. 26 needle, 346, 277. 25 needle, you can cheat a 277 through it.
Oh, 277 will work.
Yeah, you can do it. 277, 207. 24, you could do a 207 thread all day long.
Easily.
23 and 21, 23, 22, and 21, that's a 138 range. And why would you use one over the other? It's preference most of the time. Sometimes people are
You
using
mean as far as thread size goes?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's preference, yes.
Yeah, you know, sometimes people are using a real firm leather that they're sewing with a 138 thread, and so they'll use a bigger diameter needle, maybe like a 23, because they don't want to bend a needle. Because you could bend a needle, but depending on the temper of the leather. So ultimately, 138, I like a 21.
Yeah,
207, I like a 24, 25.
You had a good illustration when you said if you take a piece of rope and throw it into an empty 55-gallon barrel, that's what your stitch might look like if your needle is too big. Well, just think of it like this. If you're using a 25 or a 26 needle and you decide you want to sew a smaller project, so you drop on down to 138 thread, my goodness, the hole's going to be great big, and it's going to be so big that your knot just comes right.
Well,
it's going to lay on top of the leather.
The thing is that in order to create the hoop, tension has to be created on the thread as it comes up to create the hoop. So if that hole is too big in the first place, it may not create enough tension, and it may skip, or it may not sew at all.
Yeah. So you can do these things that you want to do. A lot of it simply involves thinking things through.
Esther, I have an answer to your question.
Oh my gosh. How about binding attachments for class 4? I'm making Aussie hats, having a hard time binding the brim.
I have an answer for her question if I can
good,
find
'cause I
it. Because David at Leather Machine is a genius. Don't let him.
You left the cat out of that already.
Yeah, I've already said it. So there is a binding attachment that will fit it. It is actually designed for a Juki 441.
Huh.
And it's not a product that we carry as of yet, because I literally found this out on Wednesday when I seen that question come online.
But we could get
But
it.
we are going to reach out and see if it's something that we can carry. So I think it would be pretty awesome to be able to have a binding attachment for the 3 and the 4. I'm also going to check on the 26 and make sure that we've got all the attachments for those. Sometimes it gets easy just to be caught up in selling machines and not really getting all the goodies that you could have with it. So yes.
What would you think about basic, just a little bit of review to where we're at so far? We've talked about progression of a machine from there. You know, decide what you're going to sew the most of. Get that machine first. And going back to who you buy it from, ask a professional. Ask him.
I don't even care if you buy it from us. Just
My name is Rusty. His name is Rusty.
we're all rusty here.
Anyway, just ask for him. We can tell you what machine you probably want to buy. And by way of self-promotion, we'll never let you get hung with a sewing machine that won't do what you want. We'll find a way to fix that.
I'm buying one back next week.
Yeah.
And it was simply because he bought a class 20 and then decided that he really would prefer the 26.
Well, the 26 that's sitting there is a customer that brought in to get some service on.
There you go. So anyway, yeah,
We'll fix you up. So you'll soon enough discover, after you've had your first machine for a while, what other needs you have that your machine won't handle, and we will help you out the best that we can. As far as stitching pattern, Rusty covered that. As far as oiling and maintenance, hey, if it moves, squirt it. Thread tension, that was complicated. Hopefully it's helped a little bit. Changing a motor, man, If it's cost effective for you, you can do it. Make sure you kind of are friendly with a little jigsaw maybe and a screwdriver and a drill. And other than that, as far as weights of threads and needles, Rusty gave you pretty good advice there. And by the way, we have a little booklet that is free of charge. Is it online?
Yeah,
You can.
it's on our website.
You can download it, or
Yeah.
or just.
No, it don't download it. It's on our website.
Okay, that's got a page in it explaining a fair bit about the machines, and it's really got a good recommendation page for needles and thread sizes. So check that out. We talked about how thick a leather or thin a leather you can sew with a Class 3, and we talked about binding attachments. Is there somewhere else we need to go from here? I'm just not.
Somebody had a question about what servo motor would you put on a 3 and a 4? What motor do we recommend if we needed to replace a motor on a 3 or a 4? What servo motor?
It has a lifetime warranty.
And we carry them.
Can we carry them? Call me. I'll send you one.
If you're the original owner.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if you're the original owner, that's the deal. And that's part of the deal about the machines is that, you know, if you have issue with it, we'll fix you up. You know, they come with a limited lifetime warranty. Now, don't get me wrong. Unfortunately, if you live in the Gulf Coast and have severely been wet,
Hurricaneized.
you know, that's not really something that's covered under warranty, but I'm
More than
happy to
likely,
help.
We would help you out.
I'm happy to help.
And, you know, you got to admit, Cobra takes care of us as well as we take care of our customers.
So to be honest with you, we would basically replace it with the direct replacement. Now, we do sell a servo motor that we use as a upgrade machine. It is not one of these.
Sorry, I'm not on that camera.
It's all right. It's not one of these digitals. It is an analog machine. So it's a little round machine, has a dial. It's very friendly to install, and that's why we use it. And it's a super, super reliable motor.
So if they had the Juki machine and then went out and it's not lifetime on their machine and they need one.
Yeah,
we'll help
or even the question on the Rex, you know, if that, and so we carry those motors. I want to say they're $150, but they are an analog motor.
Hopefully that helps out a little bit.
Yeah.
Alan has a question, and he says, am I correct about the 3 is a heavier duty class or a heavier duty machine than the Class 4? Smaller the number, heavier the machine.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No. Class 3 and 4 will
see if I
sell
can-
the same
The machines are identical except for the throat length. The parts interchange, the stitching capacity is the same. It's all about how much you can fit into the throat of the machine.
I'll just turn our camera here just a little bit.
Will not sew heavier.
So pull that 3 back just a little bit, Kevin.
No, it sews the exact same amount.
So the difference between the 3 and the 4?
Is this distance. That is it.
Same machine, just a longer
Same machine, longer throat. What else?
I don't know, let me set this camera back. Try not to make everybody dizzy.
Okay. Because if you ask me where we're going from here, I'm going to say Mexican. Food across the street.
They bought a Cowboy 3200 machine. Works fine. Can you use the same needles as a 3 and a 4?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the needles will interchange. If I'm not mistaken, the bobbins interchange.
It's pretty much
the same machine.
Pretty much, yeah.
Let's see. And Stacy just shared the link to the booklet on there.
Awesome.
Did we want to show? I got one on the the 26 and the 3 and the 4. Thread weight on the 26th.
Up to 207.
Up to 207.
It's friendly with 207.
And that's top and bobbin. And then the 3 and the 4.
They'll sew up to a 415. 415 is like a small rope, and most places don't carry it. So a lot of times the heaviest that you'll find is a 346, and you can run them top and bottom, but again, you're really not benefiting yourself, I don't think, because if you're running 346 on the bobbin, you're changing that bobbin out a lot.
Yeah, that's not going to go far.
What
How
else?
about thread weights on this monster back
Monstrosity, same thing, up to 415.
Baling twine.
The benefit of this machine is the foot lift. The foot lift on a Cobra is about 7/8 of an inch. If I'm not mistaken, this is 1 1/8 inches or 1 1/4 inches.
I think it's 1 1/4 inches.
This
gosh.
this is the first one of these that we've carried since Cobra came out with them.
Yeah.
Singer used to make one similar to this, and
Yeah.
we've seen them in passing.
They were used, the old Class 7s that Singer made were used in the Navy when they actually used them to repair sails.
So
I helped Jesse put that on the table, and
Takes two people, don't
it
it?
was 3.
yeah, I was going to say the Class 4 could almost take 2 people. That thing is a monster. But you know, I've seen them used a lot in saddle making, putting the shearling on underneath. And so, you know, when you have a need for it, you have a need for it. And we have a customer that needed one, and so we ordered the only 2 that Cobra had at the time, and I believe we have this one left.
So we talked a little bit about the tension, and that we're not maybe changing the tension of the bobbin part of it. I'm going to move this other camera over here. Can you show us where we're changing our top tension?
Sure.
And then explain, you've already said maybe we don't need to change it in the bobbin. And
Don't.
just like it's really hard to change a CV joint instead of maybe it's just your tires are out of balance.
Right.
It's not easy to change the bobbin.
Not really.
Yeah, so let me move this camera over a little bit, and we'll do it on this 20. Let me see if I can get it set here. We don't have to do any sewing, really.
The tension arrangements or the tension mechanisms on the machines, they might be a little different. Well, they are a little different from a flatbed to a Class 26 to a Class 3 or 4. They all do the same thing. They all do exactly the same thing.
And that's sort of the deal is you just have to understand that all sewing machines pretty much need the same thing. They need tension created. They need a take-up mechanism to pull up the slack and to create the knot, and they need a hole. I mean, and it has to pretty much be in an order.
That's a really good, simple explanation.
So on this 20,
What?
where are we changing our tension for the top?
So tension.
Make it simple, Rusty.
Okay. Here.
That's it. See that knob? Turn that. That puts more tension on the thread. Loosen it. It puts less tension on the top thread.
All right, hang on just a little bit. I'm going to come around the horn here just a little bit. Now we talked about changing colors of thread, and maybe we didn't get it through our.
You want to know the
Tension
best way
plates.
to do it, though?
Sure.
The best way to do it is to pull the thread out of the needle.
Let me go back out just a little bit.
Lock your presser foot up, pull the thread out of the needle, cut the thread, tie the new color on, and pull it through. Once you get the color through, cut it off, put it back through the eye of the needle, and you didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
Now, every time you go through this, every loop you make, you're going to create the potential for more tension.
Yes.
So people ask me how many times they should go through that.
Well, how many holes you go through on that?
2.
That's enough.
Right? All it is a thread guide, but you will, the more you wrap that thread around it, the more tension you will create. Ultimately, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty.
You know, I have heard people ask me why you have to go through this. And the reason is simple. Thread has a tendency to where's my hand?
Oh.
Thread has a tendency to loop.
Yeah, it has a memory.
Yes. And so this prevents your thread from looping up and actually getting itself around a knob or
Which
something
will
like that.
happen.
And yeah, it's not such a big deal here because it's right in front of your face and you can see what's happening. But when the part of that mechanism is on the back of the machine, like on a Class 3 or a Class 4, you can't always see where that thread goes. So it's good that you can see it on this one.
So if we didn't change the color the way that you said, what we have a pressure plate? Is that what you call them?
No, it really is more, yeah, I mean, it is a pressure plate. It's got 2 plates and a spring. Again, it's more of a guide to keep the thread in line so that it doesn't get looped up around here.
All right, let me
It's an anti-looping device.
move just a little bit different here and get our camera down so we can see. Hopefully everybody can see in there.
Where are we looking?
We're looking right at the bobbin.
All right. Right here on the side, there's 2 screws. The back screw attaches the tension plate to.
Let me try to move around.
Please don't loosen those.
These screws are like the tip of an ink pen. I mean, when that little tip comes out, that's how big these screws are.
And they get lost so easily.
All that screw does is holds that plate on. The front screw actually creates the tension. That plate is shaped kind of like that. It has a little bit of an arch to it. And so one screw back here holds it down. The other screw here causes it to flatten out, and that increases the pressure out here more. And so ultimately, though, leave it alone.
Yeah.
It really does not benefit you to have to change the tension in a number of spots. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, if you bought a used machine and they were sewing lightweight thread and you're going to sew a heavier weight thread, you might have to adjust it once. But after that, it's done. It's pretty much where it is.
So when you go to pull your bobbin in, it does have a click. If you're able to hear
yeah, you'll
those
be able to hear
sounds,
here, but
you can pull it and click it.
You've got a slot, and that thread comes up over it and then down under that. And it will make a little bit of a sound, but it's nothing you're going to capture on camera. You know what I mean?
Oh, I wasn't.
Yeah. Now, there is a little bit of a click here when you're coming around this hook. You will hear that, but ultimately it's...
Whoever invented sewing machines was very clever.
And probably never lived to see the fruition of...
They're probably stuck in a jail cell with a whole bunch of metal.
So anyway, have we covered all the live stuff?
So. Yeah, I think so. And then on the...
Three more?
Three more.
All right, well, let's hit them real quick.
Can we supply the servo motor and speed reducer that fits the Rec 607?
Yes.
Yes.
So
They don't fit.
They're universal. And universal means you may have to drill a hole or two in the
You
table.
probably will have to drill a hole.
But yes, it's about a 300 by the time you get it shipped, it's probably 325, 330, something like that.
Texo 2750.
What about it?
Is it the same equivalent to Cobra Class 26?
I'm not qualified to answer that question.
Yeah.
I say that in all honesty. If I could look at the machine, I could probably tell you. Here's the thing is the machine models and shapes have been knocked off for hundreds of years. Most of them were created by Singer Company, and even the Conso 206, well, that was a Singer model at some point. And so most likely you have similar capabilities. But it's, like I said, there's so many variations. So
just be happy with the guy you buy it from.
That's the deal.
That's really important.
What's the benefit of a 3 or 4 over the 26? Price-wise, I feel the 26 could do everything that he needs it to do.
Then that's
very well.
That's probably the machine you need. The benefit is being able to stitch over about 9/16 of an inch. I mean that's really it. I mean, you're going to sew heavier threads and heavier weight projects. There are different plates that are made to replace this plate for the class 3s and 4s. There's a stirrup plate, holster plate, narrow slot plate, and then there's the blanket set. And so those do offer some benefit, mainly if you're doing like stirrups and holsters.
Heavy stuff.
But if I was doing wallets and bags...
26.
26 is great.
You know, if I'm not doing a bunch of holsters or sheaths or... There's no
need
to.
No.
That may be all there is unless you have more information to give.
No, I'm starting to hear his stomach growling.
Thank you so much out there for asking the questions.
I have to feed this guy.
There's one question from Dylan that he said to...
Dylan did have a question. I forgot about it.
Dylan, what do you got?
He loves SLC's kind of history and things like that. Where are you from in Iowa?
A little town south of Waterloo called LaPorte City, which no one's ever heard of. I was actually spent the first 10 years of my life in Brandon, Iowa. Population is 200, maybe 250 if there's a parade.
Do you know what Brandon is famous for? The world's largest cast iron skillet.
You got to have something.
It's huge. I mean, it's just right there on the side of the road. And my son's name is Brandon. And I'm like, Brandon, get in the skillet. Let's take a picture.
And there's a lot of geodes there along the way.
There are a lot of geodes.
That flows through there, but that's about it.
You can hear all the laughing in the room because Kevin's from Iowa. Chad's from Iowa. Stacy's from Iowa. We have half the room here from Iowa.
And I was born and raised south of Keokuk, just barely inside of Missouri.
Wow, that's pretty weird.
Crazy.
That would explain a lot about you people.
That's going to explain a lot about a lot. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Until next time, we're good to go for next Friday. We're doing
Next Friday.
something.
I think we're going to be doing rawhide lamp. Recovering a
Oh, John.
Working with rawhide.
John's going to be covering a rawhide lamp. Awesome. Well, that'll be a good one.
Glad it's him and not
Yeah,
me. I can tell you
that'll
that.
be riveting.
Yeah.
So-
He's been Bass Pro. He did lamps over.
He did
at
he
Bass
did
Pro,
all
so-
almost all the lamps at the home store Bass Pro and possibly some others. So
That's
that'll
pretty good endorsement.
that's pretty good endorsement. So until next week or next time, thanks for joining us.